Welcome to Chair-isma, where we embrace Ken Blanchard's wisdom that none of us is as smart as all of us. I'm your host, Francine Lasky, and I'm inviting you to pull up a proverbial chair and tap into the rich insights of our Vistage community. I just finished a fascinating conversation with Cheryl McDuffie James. We're titling this episode, The Vulnerability Thing is a Work in Progress. Cheryl's been a chair since 2017 in Central Florida, where she is a CE and a key group. She gave me great advice once on parenting and coaching your own kids, or not coaching them, as the case may be. Cheryl will give you some great insight into building your relationships with people who refer members to you. And don't miss Cheryl and my discussion about she will never be voted most vulnerable chair and how that intersects with her faith and her Vistage practice. Don't miss the takeaways from today. Cheryl is dedicating a meeting this year and calling it Thinking Month. Check out what questions she's asking, and you can also find them at our show notes at francinelasky.com. Let's dive in. I'd like to start out, Cheryl, first with a little thing I call ratios so that people can get to know you a little bit better. Nobody is all one thing or another, and sometimes you have to decide on a balance. I'm going to give you two things, and I'd like you to give me the ratio as to which one you prefer.
Okay.
So I'll start off with dog or cat. I'll say I'm 80% dog, 20% cat. How about you, dog or cat?
I would say probably 90% dog, 10% cat.
Text or phone call?
Yeah, that's a tough one to say. 80% text.
Morning person or night owl?
Definitely 100% night owl.
Sweet like ice cream or salty like French fry?
Sweet 90.
Time or money?
Ooh. Time is money, so let's see. I'm going to say 60% money, 40% time.
Plan ahead or spontaneous?
80% plan ahead.
Concert or movie?
90% concert, 10% movie.
This one is the most important one. Are you ready? What is your peanut butter to jelly ratio?
70% peanut butter and 30% jelly.
We're going to just get straight into questions. What is your why? Why do you do this job?
I do this because I think my passion and my purpose is to create better leaders to help them make better decisions.
I love it. What would your members say is your superpower?
Well, it's interesting that you ask because in April of this year, I actually asked my member this question. They see me as someone that challenges their thinking and that I also support them every step of the way. Whatever they're facing, they feel as though my way of connecting with them is to really look beyond where they are and look more into what their capabilities are. So they see me as having the expertise and dedication to really help them accomplish their goals.
Do you think that's your superpower?
I do believe I have the ability to see things in people that they don't necessarily see themselves. And that helps me to determine how best to work with them to maximize their potential. So I will say my vision is my superpower.
It's probably what they're seeing as the result of that. You see kind of the process, right? How do you think you got that vision? What's the foundation of that superpower?
I see a lot of times what others don't. And that's why I'm really interested in working with people who are willing to do the work. Because we all have the ability to be more, to do more, and not for the sake of doing it, but really just to be able to fulfill who we really were created to be. I stand in that with a lot of confidence, and I've been able to see that not just in my clients, but in my family, my friends. I think they all see that in me.
How do you balance supporting your members and pushing them out of their comfort zones? And I really want to focus in more on your personal experience, how you as a chair think about it rather than anything else. Because I think as chairs, we're always, do I want to go this far? Do I not want to go this far? How much is just my personal ambition for them versus themselves? How do you think about that?
Some people, you can turn up the heat a little, others a little lower, but you just have to know what that is enough to make that push. They need to feel uncomfortable. And I'm a big advocate of without discomfort, there is no growth. However, I'm not trying to sting them. I'm just trying to make it uncomfortable enough for them to decide to make the decision to do something different. I do that better than anyone else in their circle. They don't have anyone else. Some people think they want it, and then when they get it, they're not able to make the adjustment. And I respect that too. So that's why I do think there is a certain style for, like, every group has its own culture. Every chair, is part of that culture.
I'm going to ask you now to tell us a story about the time you were the most uncomfortable as a chair.
It was the whole vulnerability piece. I am the kind of person that I am very much compartmentalized in how I work. I worked with male-dominated teams, and in most cases, I was the only one. And I learned really quickly that there was no place for how you felt or what was going on in your life. You came to work, you focused on your work, and that's what you did. So I literally grew up in that type of environment. So bringing my personal life, what I'm feeling was not a part of that. It was not expected. So when I went to chair training and I was told that part of being a chair is being vulnerable, it really took me aback. So much so I really had to think about, did I really want to do this? Because I'm happy to help you and get you to a vulnerable place, but this isn't about me. That's the way I see it. But the vulnerability thing is a work in progress with me with my work. I am more vulnerable in work than I was before I started my chairing journey 7 years ago, but I would be by no means the person that would get the most vulnerable Vistage Chair award.
Is there a particular time that you can remember where somebody else's vulnerability led to your growth, or when you had to experience that vulnerability that you grew or learned something about yourself?
Oh, absolutely. I learn from people every day. That's one of the things I love about being a Vistage Chair is being surrounded by people who do that better than I do, right? And so I'm able to learn from my members, from other chairs. They, when they express their vulnerability, because empathy is a big thing for me. So I can empathize with people very well. How can I help? What do you need? Is there anything I can do? When I see people show up and they're vulnerable, I am that person who treats that with kid gloves and I try to be part of that space that they feel comfortable with. I just don't think that vulnerability is one of the areas where people grow from me because I'm not a big vulnerable person. But there are other things that I think I do really well that inspire others. And I think that's the beauty of being a chair is that we all have, like you said, we all have our unique superpowers. And if we were all handling the same superpower, it'd make us boring, right? So
Yeah.
I think I'm good with standing in mine. And if I need someone to be vulnerable with, I know which chairs are good at that, and I will go to them for that. Just like I think when people need someone with vision and accountability and empathy, they will come to me.
I always use in my recruiting that a CEO or a chair, any kind of leader has to be a Swiss Army knife, right? And you're an awesome toothpick. I may be a great, bottle opener, right? And the beauty is that together we make the whole Swiss Army knife and we can solve whatever problem it is. But you don't have to be all of them all at once. I think that's a vulnerability to say, I'm going to go to somebody who's better at this than I am.
Yep.
And that's okay. For sure.
Absolutely. I love that.
Well, yeah. Thank you for sharing that. So I've noticed this in a lot of chairs that there is an intersection between faith and Vistage. And it doesn't really matter, I don't think, what faith you are. I'm interested in what you see in the Venn diagram of faith and Vistage.
Thank you. First of all, I love that you asked me that question because I don't always get spaces where they're open to hearing this, but it's such a core component of who I am. My life is driven by my faith. And it is that faith, I think, that I've helped so many clients and Vistage members to have hope when things just didn't look very hopeful. I know I was created for a purpose, and I'm so grateful that that has become very apparent to me. So I know that the work that I do is not about the work. And so whether I am chairing a group of, 8 people or a group of 15, it doesn't matter. Each of those people were created for something very unique. And if I have an opportunity to help them in their journey to fulfill their purpose, help them redirect, find, explore, whatever that may be, I am here for that. And so with that comes from knowing I can't do that alone, that I have to depend on, my higher power, which is God, and, living by the example that Jesus led and what I'm told through the Bible, not to take it in context to support what I want, but in its full transparency. And one of the things I do to keep myself accountable with my faith is since 2006, which is the year I started my business, I have either attended, co-led, or led a women's Bible study. I feel as though if I get away from that, it's easy because of all of what's happening around us, I could lose my focus. So it's other women look at it as like I'm helping them, but I'm really helping myself. I'm helping myself stay close to the word, and so that I am living in that way. Now, do I fall short? Absolutely. I can tell you right now, I have a laundry list of things, and patience is on the top of my list. I was chuckling with someone. I said, I pray for patience, and I swear this year I have had some really, really trying situations that will not go away. And what I learned is when you pray for something, you will get an opportunity to get that, but it may not come the way you think it comes. So I just have to learn, how do I take it hour by hour, day by day. And in that, God is refining me to have more patience. So it just didn't happen the way I thought. I thought it may be less painful, but of course, nothing works that way.
It doesn't work that way. If I can, I see you when you say you're not the most vulnerable, you've just chosen who you're going to be vulnerable to. And I think your faith, a higher power, that's who you put your vulnerability in. I think that's a beautiful thing. It's not about being less vulnerable. I think it's just you choose who you're going to be vulnerable to.
Love that.
And
thank you. I'm
so-
going to take that. Now I don't have to say I'm not the most vulnerable person. That was
You're not.
insightful.
How do you recharge your own chair-isma when you're feeling drained?
So I've really gotten good about this. It's a great question. I look at how many people I coach because I do think that impacts how draining it may be for me. And then another thing that I do is every August for the last 3 years, I detach from all things work and business and focus on me, my relationships, and my to-do list. It's literally about making sure that in a job that I have where my life's work is about pouring into others, I get depleted. And so I have to be intentional about how do I actually restore myself so that I can show up well for others. And it's a great example. I saw this when I came into my triads this month, and I was like, everybody was low energy. They've got all these key stakeholders and family and friend obligations. And, it's like they're already kind of, they're out of energy. And it made me really think about boundaries and how they may want to think too about where do you get that R&R for yourself. I think most people take time, and most of my members do take time off in the summer, but that's different because it's usually focused on family. When I do this intentionally, it really is about my agenda and not necessarily everybody else's.
I think that's so important, especially as chairs. We're so about giving that sometimes your point of you have to take care of yourself, put your own mask on before you help others, I think is a message sometimes that we miss. So I appreciate that. What's the most innovative meeting format or exercise that you've done in your group? What's something that somebody else could maybe take home or try in their own group?
This year, I've slated the month of November for their Think Month. The theme is around thinking. And I've even actually worked with the host to make sure we are in locations where they can break out. They can find places outside of the meeting room, go outside. People will really appreciate being able to get outside of the meeting room and having time to just really think through things that are happening in their life. And then we'll, of course, come back and debrief as a group and learn some more about each other and where we end up. So I'm excited about that.
So, Cheryl, what's one strategy that significantly boosted your member recruitment? Something that you really go to that helps you find great members and sign them?
As much as we'd like to believe our members are going to be our recruiting source, most of them are there because it's lonely at the top. So they really don't have a network of people to recruit from. And those chairs that do have that, they're so fortunate. So much of my recruitment is, referral, but not necessarily from members, but trusted advisors. So one of the things I do is I really take the time to build a network, just a network of individuals who, like myself, work with CEOs and business owners. So a lot with bankers, attorneys, accountants. I really try to foster that relationship in a way where it's not just about them giving me members, but I'm also investing in them. So I share materials, I invite them to our events. So they really do see me more than just someone that they are referring their clients to, because what I learned is that particularly in the professional services space, their clients are so important to them and they are very protective of their clients. So you may work quite a bit of time building that relationship before you ever get a referral, because they are now having to say, I'm entrusting someone else, with my client.
There's times where you can't measure leadership. You can't measure thoughtfulness. Like there's no number that's associated with that. I'm interested for you in both your recruiting efforts and in your ongoing practice. How do you measure that impact?
This year, one of the new things that I incorporated is during the member check-in is I asked the question, what does an outstanding day look like for you? So in my groups, and I know it varies, but the check-in is big. When they're doing their check-in, their personal and professional update, they also share what that answer to that question would look like for them. And then when we're wrapping up and rating the meeting for the day, I asked them, did we meet their expectation? And so far, so good, no misses. But I think it's important to me in terms of how do I measure that for my members real time, because this is the one day a month that they take out of their, business to work on their business and on themselves. And I think it's important that we try to be as real time and meet them where they are in that moment. And I think that question does a good job of trying to capture that.
So, all right, we'll do kind of our 2 follow-up questions, which is always kind of the take home. We do what's called in my group, spirit of sharing. So it's always something great that you've run into. Who do you listen to in terms of podcasts, or do you?
Yeah. So since I wrote my book, and you mentioned this, so my book is for women. I targeted to millennial and Gen Z women. And in that quest, because I do deal with relationships as part of what I talk about, as well as the work and leading and parenting, I uncovered a professor who has a podcast. It's the Professor G Pod with Scott Galloway. He tends to explore topics that really resonate with me and allow me to get greater insight into the hearts and minds of the generations that exist. And so part of that is he's been doing a lot of work about Gen Z men. And as I'm talking to these women, I'm finding that finding men that can meet them where they are has become a real challenge. It really helps me get some insight on how do I better connect with the millennial and Gen Z people in my life, whether that's work or personal. And particularly since I don't have sons, it's nice to kind of hear from him because 95% of my clients are men. So even though I wrote a book for women, those are the guys that I'm really invested in from a, career perspective. So understanding them better and what they are up against is really important. I'd have to say that's my favorite podcast.
Fascinating. I have never heard of that one, so I will definitely look it up. And what are your top Vistage related books that you recommend?
During my month off, I listened to the audiobook called Will by Will Smith, which I don't usually listen to books like that. But one of my trusted advisors told me about that book. He's a Gen Z or millennial, right on that line. But it was full of life lessons, things about work, about community, about leadership.
Thank you so much, Cheryl, for sitting down with me today and sharing all your wisdom. I so appreciate your time, both that you've invested in this podcast and in me.
Wow. My biggest takeaway was how Cheryl's faith intersects with her Vistage work and makes it really meaningful. Thanks to Cheryl for sharing today. But just like with our members, let's do a little personal action stuff. First, which idea that Cheryl mentioned sparked some excitement for you? What'd you learn? Second, when will you bring it to the group? How will you present it to them? Third, who can you lift up? Who could benefit most from the learning? And fourth, let's connect via LinkedIn and share your chair journey with the community. You can find a transcript and show notes on my website at francinelasky.com. Who pulled out a chair for you? Who do you value in the Vistage community? We want to hear their story next. Nominate them by reaching out through Vistage email, website, or social media channels. Also, please tell other chairs and your VCG about this podcast and all the social media stuff, like maybe subscribe or comment or review us wherever you get your podcasts. It helps other chairs find us and strengthen our circle. With appreciation for the wisdom that we share, until next time, keep growing your chair impact.